Hi, I am totally excited to teach you how to work an odd count tubular peyote stitch. I also have a blog post that has photos of every step of this, so I suggest watching this video and reading that blog post, and between those two resources I am pretty sure you're going to have luck with this technique that may be new to you. So odd count peyote stitch, the first thing you should know about that is we're going to be working with an odd number of beads. Okay, what I have here in front of me is some nylon beading thread. This is size D. I have some size 8 Japanese seed beads. I have an 11 stitch odd count peyote tube that has 6 rows of beads on it worked. And then I have a beading needle. This is a size 10 Japanese beading needle. There's also some really great English beading needles out there that will work as well. So without further ado, let's jump into how to do this. The first thing you want to do is cut a length of yarn. I've cut, that's so funny, I'm going to keep calling it yarn, and it is thread. What you're going to do is cut a length of thread that's about 36 inches long. Mine's a little shorter just to make it easier to work with while I'm showing you how to work this stitch. I have strung 11 beads onto my thread. You can string on more or less than that. Just make sure for this technique that you are stringing on an odd number of beads. So after I get those beads onto my yarn, what I'm going to do is take my needle, which I've already threaded onto the yarn, and go back through all of those 11 beads again. And I'm sure I'm having a hard time because you're watching. That part is not very hard. And then what you'll do is pull your thread through. Sorry, I had to have my hand on the beads there. But you want to leave yourself at least a 6-inch tail. So you can see I'm kind of holding onto that tail a little bit just to keep it there. So I've left myself a tail, and you can see that I've turned that into a circle. And what I'm going to do is come back through the first bead again. And that is going to really close up my circle. Just be careful not to let your tail get too short there. You're going to want that tail to hold onto it, so it's key that you have a few inches on your tail. So now I am ready to start. And at this point, I think it's easiest if you go and get a knitting needle or a pencil or something to stick what you're working on onto, just like that. Okay, so let's get started with doing the peyote stitch. I have taken my circle of beads and I've put it onto a knitting needle. This is a US size 9 knitting needle. You could also use like a pencil or any other tube that you can come up with. It just makes it easier to work the stitch if you have them on something. You'll see that my tail is right here and I'm holding it onto it with my thumb. And then the working thread that's coming out of that last bead that we threaded the thread through is coming out right there. If you aren't working on a knitting needle, you can tape your tail down and that will hold it in place. I just hold it with my hand, but I've certainly heard of people taping it. Now what you're going to do is go grab a bead and put it onto your thread and then slide it down and skip a bead, and then with your needle go through the next bead in the circle, just like that. Don't worry too much about how those beads are landing right now. You'll make them behave. And then you're going to go grab a bead and then skip a bead and then go through the next bead right there. And then string a bead on. Skip a bead. Go through the next bead. And then skip a bead, grab a bead, go through the next bead. You are going to do this, sorry, let's make sure you're in focus there, 5 times total. And now we are back up at the beginning of our work, ready to work row 2. And what I'm going to do is grab a bead, and then I'm going to go into this bead that's sticking up a little bit. That's the first bead that I placed on this row. And I'm going to pull the thread through. And then I'm going to go grab a bead, and then I'm going to go through that next bead that's sticking up right there. It should be pretty obvious where to put the needle in. And you can see I'm holding onto my tail right there, and that really helps things stay nice and tight and tidy. There's like a little bit of a yanking up. Don't forget there's that blog post to go look at if you get confused. If you follow that along with this video, I think you are going to have great success. Now I'm going into the next bead right there. You're going to be continuing on like this until all of your bead columns have 6 beads in them. That means if you did an 11 stitch bead and every column has 6 beads, your bead is going to take up 66 beads. Whoops, sometimes your thread goes around the knitting needle and you just have to loosen it up. I love when that happens on video because I can show you what to do. So you can see that I've just made it around and I'm ready to work the 3rd row. So I'm going to grab a bead, I'm going to skip a bead again, and I'm going to go into the next bead right there, and I'm starting my columns of 3 beads, just like that. So continue on like that until you have 6 beads, and I'll show you how to finish it off. Okay, so let's finish this baby off. You can see right here in this column I've got 6 beads, but in this one I still only have 5 beads, so that means that column needs 1 more bead. Go grab a bead, string it on, and now if I look here, that one has 6 beads, so I don't need to put on any more beads. This bead that I'm working on doesn't have a tail down on this end, but a tail would be a good indicator to you that you're back at the beginning of the round, just like knitting. Seriously, it's so similar to knitting, but it's with beads, which is fun. So now I'm back at the beginning and I've got columns of 6 all the way around my bead, and I can just finish it off. And all you're gonna do to finish it off is take your needle that is threaded with the thread and just go through all of the beads around the top of this cylinder and tighten it up and tidy it up a bit. And then once you've made it all the way around, just go through a few other beads, and then you'll take your needle and you'll just go into the center of your bead and then grab some scissors and just cut off that thread right there, and it is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to come undone, and you have made your first peyote stitch bead. Don't be surprised if the first bead you made is kind of wonky. Go ahead and make the rest of the beads that you need for the Pass the Peyote. You might end up deciding to cut that first bead apart and do it again, or if you have enough beads, just make another bead and let that first bead be a practice bead. If you're challenging, grab some bigger beads and try with that before you try with these size 8 beads. You guys know all the tricks with knitting will apply to this new technique as well. And by all means, ask questions. So happy to help you learn how to do the Odd Count Tubular Peyote stitch.